Hi guys, it's Stephanie Mo Davis. Welcome to my channel. This is a continuation from last video, which describes my awakening process. And today I'm actually going to get into the day or the several hours where my awakening became pretty evident. First, I want to mention that in my last video I had talked about there were signs and synchronicities occurring really prevalently for about 6 months prior to my this particular day that I'm going to get into. So the signs were all there. I knew something was happening. I was verbalizing it to my family and friends that something was going to happen. I just didn't know what exactly was happening and when. I do want to also mention that in this video I'm going to mention a little bit about my encounter with my twin flame, which happened on the same day. I do want to say that I initially met my twin flame 10 years prior to this particular day that I'm going to discuss, just so you guys have a little background about that. All right, so this was in 2015 in August. I received a telephone call from actually my twin asking to participate in a mutual mission, so to speak, that was going to be a very temporary situation. And I already had a high amount of respect and adoration for this person, and I was absolutely thrilled and honored to be a part of helping in any way that I could. So that day was the phone call, and we actually scheduled a day, I think it was just several days later, where there was going to be an actual meeting and a discussion as to what I was going to be doing. And I knew that what I was going to be doing had to do with my current mission in life, which was teaching yoga, teaching meditation, and doing spiritual guidance and counseling. So when I got the call and the details, just several days later, I was going to a location that was several hours away, and about an hour and a half into the drive, I was really excited, really looking forward to what was going to be happening, and I developed a really excruciating headache. And I typically don't get headaches or migraines, and it felt different. And immediately I started to feel a little panicked because I was so looking forward to what was happening later that day. I thought for a second in my state of panic that, you know, maybe I was having an aneurysm or something was happening, or I was going to develop this really horrible migraine and I couldn't perform, so to speak. So the rest of the drive down, which was about another hour and a half, I was a little concerned and nervous, and the anxiousness turned into a little more fear because I was afraid that I wasn't going to be able to actually do what I was intended to do in that visit. But thankfully I made it there, and the anxiety that had occurred pre-getting down there while I had this sensation kind of distracted me to what I knew was happening. And when I got down to where I was going, I thought about it. I thought, all right, I've got a very strange sensation at the center of my forehead. It doesn't feel like a headache. It's throwing me off. I'm feeling a bit anxious. And what I started to do, without even realizing it, was tapping my forehead with my 2 first fingers. And it just felt that was the only comfort and relief that I could give myself, is if I just kind of closed my eyes and tapped it. And it was about an hour of tapping on my forehead that I realized, oh my God, I know this. I do chakra work all the time. This is my third eye. I'm having some sort of awakening with my third eye. And it was something that I had never experienced before quite like that. And immediately when I had that recognition, I knew exactly what it was. And I knew in that moment, I gotta pay attention. There's something happening here that I need to pay very close, detailed attention to. And I did. I already had known on the way down that it was going to be special and exciting. But that third eye awakening, the first time I had that sensation, initially was confusing. It took me several hours, but when I recognized it was the third eye opening, I felt very privileged. I felt excited, and again, just anticipating what was going to happen. All right, so for those of you who've never experienced an authentic third eye awakening, and I can only speak from my personal experience. Everybody's experience might be slightly different, But in my experience, it was a very tangible sensation. It felt like an opening right at the center of the forehead between my brows, and it literally felt like an opening and pressure, a little bit of pressure in my head. And as I said, the only thing that could relieve it was me kind of physically tapping on it and touching it. So for those of you who may have had that experience, I just want to share with you, or if you're going through it or you potentially go through it, I just wanted to give you a little bit information about how I experienced it. And ironically or not so ironically, every trip down that I made from that point forward to that location for the work, halfway into the drive, it happened again. So it was a consistent process of an hour and a half into my drive, I would feel the third eye starting to open, almost preparing me for what was going to happen when I was doing the job. So when I arrived at the location for the job, my instruction was to meet my twin, which I didn't know was my twin at the time, and have a discussion. And immediately upon my arrival and that first initial discussion we had, even though we had known each other prior, I knew in that current moment that something felt unusual, something felt really intense, and something felt somewhat urgent. I was too shy to really discuss it because I always had such a respect for this particular person, and I wasn't quite sure. I was a little bit confused in that moment what exactly I was feeling. But that being said, we had a nice conversation where there was this energy exchange that I think we both could feel, and that day proceeded with why I went down, my part of my mission, which was to do yoga and meditation and this kind of spiritual guidance for the person I was down to see. And immediately after that session, I was asked to come down, and it was going to be more of an ongoing occurrence rather than just a one-time occurrence. So the following week, I went down again. And immediately when I was halfway on my trip, the third eye opened again. When I got into the location, even the first time, definitely evident the second time, there was this energy field around me, again, that I could not only feel, but I could actually see. And I thought, again, am I getting a visual migraine? Is something happening? But when I entered the space, I felt this bubble surrounding me, this very large bubble where I could actually see these geometric patterns, like a bubble, very up close. And I could feel this energy of breath, kind of the bubble just moving in and out and in and out. And I was entering this bubble. Another thing that was interesting was when I entered the space as well, the floor underneath me changed. Floor is usually very solid. It felt very buoyant to me and very light. It was just a very unusual sensation. But because of my metaphysical background and the knowledge that I do have in this kind of work, I was really trying to surrender to the unusual circumstances and go with the flow, even though it was a little bit strange. So that second time down, there was another encounter with this individual, and it was very evident already that second time that there was an energy being exchanged that was very palpable, it was very visceral, and there was this sense again of there's something important happening here. There's an exchange happening here that's beyond our scope of maybe what was actually happening. And we actually started to discuss it, and it was really unusual and I think a little difficult for both of us because of course the timing is always really awkward. Usually when you encounter or have a reunion with a twin flame, it's unusual, it's not supposed to happen. Everything about the encounter makes you feel a little unsettled, but it was too hard to deny. So we started to actually process a little bit about what we were feeling and why is this coming up? How are things, in our personal lives, and just trying to make sense of these feelings that were being exchanged. And I do want to say that the feelings immediately were spiritually based. They were soul based. So although I always had an attraction to this person, there was a soul and a spiritual level connection and attraction that superseded the physical attraction, and it was something like I have never experienced before. And by the third time I went down, the third week, there was more exchange, there was more conversation and dialogue, less about maybe why I was there and more about what was happening, this energy between us. And it was, I think, the third time going down that he actually said to me and mentioned the phenomenon or the concept of twin flames. And I was a little offended at first because between the two of us, I very much hold, I believe, the more spiritual energy and him maybe the more scientific energy. So the fact that there was this phenomenon that he knew about and I didn't, I almost felt a little insulted. But that night I went home and I did start doing some research, and even though it had been a very short time, we've had this exchange, it was really evident to me that that's exactly what was going on. And it was powerful, it was beautiful, scary, unusual, awkward. But one thing above all else was that we both felt it, and we both verbalized that whatever was happening was kind of beyond our scope of reason at the moment, and it felt important and it felt urgent. There was a timeliness about it and there was an urgency about it. And I remember that third conversation again, the bubble was there, the breath was there in the room, the exchange was there, and I knew at that moment that, wow, my life is never going to be the same. So that being said, I do want to mention that I know that there's a multitude of ways that people come to an awakening. And for me, in my journey, it was definitely through the twin flame reunion. So when there was that recognition, so to speak, it was on both sides and clear to both of us, even though everything about it wasn't clear at all. What did start to happen outside of that was when I would travel home, things started to feel really out of alignment at home. And prior to this job, I thought, as I mentioned before in my last videos, that I thought everything was rolling along pretty decently in my life. I was married, had a yoga business. I really thought that I was fairly awakened. So this really threw me for a loop, really knocked my socks off, because I thought, oh my God, I don't know anything. I don't know anything. And but going home became more difficult because the energy exchange that was going on, not just between my twin and myself, but in the whole setting and the job and the mission, so to speak, of what was happening, was overwhelming and so beautiful, and felt like home on every level, felt like I'd finally found my purpose. So going back to my business with that energy that I was used to no longer resonated with me like it had before. And, I do want to say that I was in a very long-term relationship, and this isn't something that I usually do. But within, I'd say 3 weeks' time after that initial recognition, I knew that my life would never be the same, and I knew that I had to make changes, or I wouldn't be living an authentic life. I tried really hard to process what was happening, to see if I could stay in my current dynamic and marriage and try to navigate these feelings that I was having. But I think what kept presenting to me was the fact that I was about to go on a massive journey. And I feel like I actually saw a picture in my mind's eye of two roads, this fork in the road. And the one side was my current existence with my current life and my current marriage and my current business in the same town that I was in. And I saw that road and it felt not bad, it felt good. But then the other road, I didn't see anything. I didn't know where it was going. But there was such an incredible desire and pull towards that unknown. And I just felt that whatever was down that road and that path is why I incarnated on this planet in this go-round on Earth. And I just felt like if I'm at all authentic in my teaching, I need to follow my heart. And that was something that was really difficult for me to do because I knew that my whole life was going to collapse. The whole tower was going to collapse. Everything about how I existed was going to change if I chose the path to the unknown path. And but the fine line for me was because leaving a marriage and making all these changes is a massive decision. But for me, I kept coming back to the work that I do in the world, and that's help people live from their heart and follow their truth and listen to their intuition. And this is my passion. This is why I'm here. So when I was presented with something otherworldly that pulled my heart so obviously, I just really honestly felt like I was a fraud if I didn't practice what I was preaching, if I didn't follow my heart in that moment. And my husband at the time could see very quickly that there was a disconnect, and there was. When I'd come home, I was disconnected. I started very quickly developing, and this is part of the twin flame journey. For those of you twins out there, bless you. I know how incredibly difficult this path is. I'm 2 years plus in, and it's still very, very difficult at times, but there's a lot of clarity around it for me now as well. So my husband could see that there was this disconnect immediately when I would come home from these jobs that I had, which were now weekly. And as I said, it's really difficult to make such a huge decision to literally leave your life, especially because I created such an illusion that my life was perfect. And I didn't really recognize that until I started going through the process of awakening and ascension. But because of my family history and my templates and belief systems, perfectionism ran really high. And even though I did have a healthy relationship, everybody around us thought that we were the perfect couple. So I knew this was going to be a loss, not only for myself, but for a lot of my family members, a lot of my friends. We also owned a business together, and I knew this was going to cause some confusion and some devastation, not just on my part, but on the part of the people around me. But as I said, I just kept thinking, I am a fraud if I don't follow my heart. There's something so powerful happening here, something so important, and I have to be brave and step into the journey and see where this takes me. And at that time, in those weeks following, as the twin flame journey would have it, especially towards the beginning, I developed somewhat of an obsession with just kind of looking at photographs of this person and getting any information I could about this person. There was some sort of attachment, some sort of magnetism, some sort of obsession, and I've never really felt that before, with just trying to make sense of what was going on by physically looking at the person. And of course that didn't happen because the attraction was really coming from the soul and not the physical. But that's kind of where our journey started, was trying to make sense of it, at least for me, through the physical embodiment of the soul of the person. So the disconnect happened really quickly, and I do think my husband at that time had mentioned a thing or two about my disconnect. It was very clear I was so excited to go down and do this job, and results were happening, and there was just a beautiful vortex of energy that was felt not only by myself and my twin, but some of the other people that were involved as well. So it was about 1 month into this process where I started to have very clear and powerful synchronicities at home. So not only was I experiencing synchronicities and signs and connection and energy at a really high magnitude at the particular space and job, but it started to transcend into my home life. And this is when I started seeing 1111. I know a lot of you out there already know what 1111 is. If you don't, 1111 is the sign of an awakening. And I didn't know what it was at the time. I just really randomly started seeing this number everywhere to the point where it was undeniable. So I went to Google and looked it up, and I was like, okay, this is part of my process. So the synchronicities started to amplify even while I was away, and at that point I knew I was in the full-fledged in the beginning of a massive transformation and a journey, and the biggest spiritual awakening that I had had up to that point. Yeah, I do want to say lastly, because I don't want to make this video too long, I'd like to say lastly that my twin, and this is probably the last I'm going to say about my twin for a little while. I'd like to get into more of the personal side of the awakening in my next video and to kind of proceed into my personal journey. But both of us, several weeks in, kind of made this pact. And even though we didn't really know what was happening, there was this expression of, do you want to go on this journey? Do you want to go on a journey? And neither of us, I think, had any clue where it was going or where it was intended to go or what it even looked like. But there was this pact between us that, all right, we're going to do this and kind of commit to this. So that being said, thank you for joining me. Have a great night. Bye.